Hey trainers, and welcome back to our latest episode of Future Sight, which is, of course, a soundproof podcast production. I am Brendan Lewis, as always, and I'm joined by my good friend Jake Muller. If you still need our online names at this point, we can provide them as well. I go by Mr. BDog46, and Jake, of course, goes by Major Bowman.
Yeah,
So
I
we're
think
here.
if you're a longtime Soundproof fan, you probably know them, but
You must.
we'll see.
You must at this point. But anyway, we're back with our latest episode here. I was tasked with the arduous chore of selecting the match this week, and I think I pulled a banger. Usually Jake does this stuff, but I'm pretty sure I pulled a banger. And we went back to what is one of both of our favorite formats. So this is kind of like the well that we'll continue to draw from when we're without a rudder, and we're dipping back into 2015, which of course was a national dex format with no restricteds allowed. We've done one match from that, and I believe it was was it the Worlds match we did?
Yeah, it was top 8. It was Layo, and it was the first one.
Yeah. That's right. That was our first one. So we're back into 2015, and we've gone to the regional scene of 2015. Now, we're going to do a little bit of storytelling here as Jake and I are going to take you down memory lane, but this was at a time when regionals were not all streamed. So there is actually kind of like a pretty like noticeable scarcity of regional level videos that are available from this event. And a lot of the videos that are available are just from like somebody standing over one of their friend's shoulders and like recording it with a phone. So the fact that this actually exists in like an official capacity, this match that we're going to show you, is actually like kind of a big deal. And the fact that they managed to also nail a banger match while they were recording is also really exciting.
Yeah, of the like 15 regionals or so that happened during the year, maybe like 4 or 5 got streamed. Yeah. And it was really just if someone had a setup they were willing to bring. It really, like, nothing was set up by the organizers or anything, just because it wasn't it just wasn't the thing to do at the time. I think that's about when like grassroots stuff started picking up a little bit more, and they did stream some regionals on the official channel. I think the very first one was St. Louis, which I would like to forget, but that was around the same time as this regional that we're talking about. But yeah, I think Clash Tournaments was one of the biggest streamers up in the New England area, New England, New York. So we were lucky enough to have them come to Sturbridge, was it, that year?
It was Sturbridge, yeah, it was Sturbridge, yeah. So this is back, it was the Massachusetts Spring Regional, which that's where Sturbridge is. So I was actually at this event. It was in my neck of the woods, and as Jake said, Clash was streaming it, which is notable because Clash actually sponsored a couple players at the time. I think they were a sponsor of Aaron Zhang, and I believe Angel Miranda
right?
was also sponsored by Clash. So that was like kind of the first instance of a VGC player actually getting sponsored. And then they also streamed this regional, which was so that there's kind of a lot of, sort of big, important VGC sort of historical facts that are kind of circulating around this event. So anyway, we can start talking about the match a little bit. The match here is between Wolfe Glick, who I'm sure you've heard of, and I believe we did one of his matches already, if I'm not mistaken. And Amelia Zoldy, who was a local Massachusetts player that used to go to some of the locals that I went to and stuff like that, and she's not really in touch with the community anymore, but was like a really like prominent local player at all of the events that I used to go to back when local scene existed before the pandemic. Yeah, but this was a really cool match, and I was talking to Jake a little bit about it before we started recording, but this to me is one of those situations where Wolfe was like at the peak of his powers. And a lot of times over the course of his career you can point to like any number of his championships, but this was one of those situations where it really felt like, given the circumstances at this tournament, that he was like unbeatable. And there were a couple factors at play for this. One of them was that he was playing Parish Song, or Parish Trap, which was kind of one of those archetypes, up until 2015, 2016, that was kind of like cringe. And it was like, oh, you play Parish Trap, and it was kind of like, it's like playing Smeargle or something like that, where...
Or Eevee.
Yeah, or Eevee. It's just like these like sort of, or a Chansey. Like these sort of, at the time, it was kind of perceived to be kind of like a cringe archetype. So it was kind of like this is kind of its first like real notable use at a big event so far as I can remember. Second of all, we're still on the 15-minute timer. So we already kind of know from his Worlds run in 2016 that Wolfe is a big proponent of like playing to timer as a win condition. So you put this like really stally, double intimidate, bulky Perish Trap team in the hands of Wolfe playing at a 15-minute timer, and you've got a pretty insane recipe that made it kind of feel to all the world like no one was going to beat him.
Yeah, even speaking of timer, like a lot of times Perish Trap teams didn't actually knock out 4 things with Perish Song, because a lot of times you can just take the initial 2 Perish knockouts, preserve your own Pokemon, and just win on time. Because if you look at Wolfe's team, other than Gengar, kinda all the whole team is notably bulky. Like that's all 5 of the non-Gengar Pokemon there are used because they are bulky, or like always trained to be bulky in most situations. And I think Arcanine's a pretty cool tech on this team, because I'm pretty sure it only is there because of Aegislash. Like if you were to look at the rest of the team, Aegislash runs through like Gothitelle, Gengar, Amogus if it's sub. Scrafty's okay into it, but Overheat Arcanine was like the best answer to Aegislash, I think, which is a really problematic Pokemon for Perish Trap.
Right, and of course Will-O-Wisp is a huge tool for Perish Trap as well. But yeah, I think is this a top 4 match?
Yes.
And then he goes on to play Ashton in finals. Which was far
this
less competitive than this.
Legendary.
Yeah, it was a really crazy tournament. I think what was the other top 8 match that you were talking about?
Yeah, Ashton played Chris Danzo in top 8, and I forget this circumstance, but Ashton triple protected to win the match. Like, he had to get 3 in a row, or else he would have lost.
That's like part of how Ashton built his reputation.
Yeah.
Perhaps one of the 2 luckiest players in VGC.
Yeah, I think the perception of Amelia at this time is that I don't think she had any like big results outside of Locals yet.
She's definitely an upstart in this.
Yeah, so I think people are starting to like recognize her name as someone that was performing well at these pretty stacked like locals in New England, and then this was her first like big breakout regional performance, so that was really fun to watch.
Yeah, definitely. And her team has kind of elements of teams that are kind of popular at this time. I think Gothitelle and Budungeru, I can't think of its name.
Jellicent?
Jellicent.
You know the Japanese name, but not in English.
But yeah, that combination with some kind of Intimidate and then Heatran was like a pretty common Trick Room core sort of throughout the format, and I think it ended up kind of popping up quite a bit at Nationals, at American Nationals this year. And then Zapdos is that's right, it double won. It was first and second in Nationals. But the kind of key piece of it all here is the Mega Sableye, which is basically unheard of before and after this tournament.
Yeah, this is like the one time it ever did anything.
Right, but you can kind of see how, if you're familiar with what it does, that it is like almost perfectly equipped to deal with like Perish Trap. So this is kind of like one of those situations where if you're Wolfe and you're like running through this tournament, you are like peepo shaking looking at this team preview. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at. I think we did a pretty good job of setting the stage here, and we can go ahead and jump into the match. All right, so pretty common lead here. You pretty much always see a Trapper led on turn 1. And of course, it doesn't really go into effect until the next turn here because of the way that the Mega Evolve works, but immediately, Wolfe Mega Evolves and gets Rain onto the field, and Heatran is stuck.
Yeah, this Heatran's in a pretty bad spot. Like, smart to call the Earth Power there. Or not, I don't even know if that was a call. You just want to get rid of the Arcanine. But, like, Heatran locked against Gengar, Politoed, and Rain. What are you going to do?
Yeah,
There's not a whole lot going on. And I think not Mega Evolving the Sableye until, like, you absolutely need to is really smart. Just because like you'll see that Amelia also brought Gardevoir to this game, and you want to leave that option open just in case Gardevoir happens to be the more prudent Mega later on during this match. Right. I believe that she Mega evolves Sableye during this game, though. At some point.
I can't remember. I want to say it wasn't until game 2, to be honest with you.
Although she didn't game 2, because that was the turn 1.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right. Man,
We'll get there.
It's like a little hazy. But yeah, we see a couple of important moves coming out here with Will-O-Wisp from Sableye, which was kind of really important in a format where Kangaskhan is all over the place. Like Will-O-Wisp ghost types are like absolutely insane in this format, which is why Jellicent is also on the team. Gengar can run it, but Disable is like kind of one of those uniquely Perish Trap moves.
Yeah, Disable in this Politoed also has Encore. I don't know if that ever gets revealed. But that's kind of another thing that this team can do to just kind of stall out games. So you'll see that the Heatran's not going to be doing much. Revealing Flash Cannon there is actually pretty big knowledge if you're Wolf. But Encore Disable is just a really good way to lock something down if you don't have the ability to Perish Trap it at the time, if it's a ghost that you can't Perish Song and Trap. And overall, it's just really annoying. It's another like timeout tool, because essentially you lock a Pokemon in without it being able to attack for a few turns.
Yeah, right. And this archetype kind of just comes with any sort of text that they can use to like slow the game down or like invalidate specific strategies because of the way that it's like such a defensive team. So this is kind of like just sort of a little bit of a wet noodle fight. I think both players kind of approach this match knowing that like you could maybe win any single game of this set by knocking out a single Pokemon. So they're both playing very defensively. Like Amelia is trying to get some chip down onto anything that she can, so she manages to kind of like land oh, there's another Perish Trap thingy.
Yeah,
eject
they always have an eject
see that
button.
anywhere else.
Yep.
But yeah, she's just kind of like laying down a whole bunch of chip damage here and there. She managed to chip a Moongus a little bit. She's got some damage onto Politoed, so she's like kind of in position to take a knockout, and is kind of doing just sort of the best that she can with Heatran in less than ideal circumstances.
She can take a knockout, but not this turn. Like, she's kind of priming things for later on.
Right.
Just because Heatran will get knocked out by a Shadow Ball or obviously a Scald at this point. And the eject button brought Gengar back, so it's not like Heatran can switch out to protect itself. I don't think Foul Play knocks out Gengar, especially because this one's probably going to be just entirely bulk and no, like, well, they never an attack, but it's going to be like max HP, something like that probably. So there's no way that's going to get knocked out in one.
Yeah. And then this is just kind of the little cycle for the rain thing here, even though Heatran is like effectively done all that it can do at this point, and you're just kind of looking at, like Jake said, like what is everything primed for right now, and you kind of see that the Pokemon that are brought here that we've seen so far, with the exception of Arcanine, are like big time Gardevoir bait, assuming it's running a Psychic move and Hyper Voice like almost all of them are here. So if you can like sort of position it, it definitely could have the opportunity to run through the team. But instead, you're right, Jake. She is going to go ahead and Mega this Sableye this game, and this. Like the place went nuts when that happened. I don't think like most of the room knew that it was a Mega Sableye. So to see something like that happen, especially as Spore is dropping, is like it was a pretty insane live moment.
Well, that was just a perfect time for it too, because imagine if that Spore goes off, the game probably just ends. Like, it's gonna take 7-8 more turns probably, but you are in such an awful spot if you're Amelia there and your Sableye goes to sleep that it's gonna be really, really tough to come back from. Even still, like, obviously Amoonguss can't get slept and it was already burned, so the bounce meant nothing to Wolf other than Sableye staying awake. But, like, you have a Hitmontop that can't touch Gengar at all. You have a Sableye that's going to be doing very minimal damage against something that is, like, against a team that is meant to be bulky. So, like, your damage options here are slim to none, and Wolf still has 2 Parasong users, alive. So this is still pretty rough for Amelia, even though that Sableye reveal is pretty cool. It really just buys a little bit more time for Amelia here.
Yeah, very little bit more time. I don't remember exactly what combination of moves Hitmontop was running at this time, but I'm pretty sure that it's just like Wide Guard and like Feint. In addition to like Fake Out and Fighting Move or something like that, but it's not like, there were times when it had access to Sucker Punch, so that's kind of out. Every once in a while you see one running like Stone Edge, so that might have had some way to hit Gengar, but I'm pretty sure this one is not. Yeah. So this is like not a Pokemon that you really want to have right now.
Amelia's was Fake Out, Feint, and Quick Guard.
Oh, Quick Guard, okay.
Yeah, which is not something, that's something else that is a tech that it wasn't ever really used. Most of the time they were Wide Guard, like you said.
Right. So yeah, Amoonguss you might think is going to be knocked out here, but it's not because it just gets withdrawn. Like there's not really any way that this combination of Pokemon that Amelia has on the field can take a knockout into that slot. Like Arcanine can switch in. I think Politoed might actually be in like close combat range, but it's like a free Arcanine switch in, so you can't really do anything about that. And then there are two more. That was the first turn of Parasong, so it's kind of like the writing is on the wall here. There's not really anything that Hitmontop is going to do except get knocked out by Parasong, and it kind of seems like game one is over at this point. She manages to catch Disable there, which was like kind of neat, but like there's only so much that can happen.
Yeah, especially with this Arcanine switch. Like the Disable, I thought was going to go into the Sableye there, just when the Disable happened, just because that locks up down the only damaging move.
Doesn't it bounce?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not used to Mega Sableye. You can't disable though, so it's another one that would have just kind of puttered out.
Right, but it prevents the effect of the move.
Right.
And I think now that I'm thinking about it, it was the idea behind the feint there, like first of all to catch like a protector and misplay, but it also goes before Rage Powder, or does the priority of that change at a different generation?
I think that feint is. Yeah, it's either before or the same bracket, and Hitmontop's faster, so it would have happened before.
Okay, so I guess that was kind of an interesting play. I thought it was just to like dodge getting close combat disabled, but I guess it was a little more.
Yeah, it's probably some of both.
There's a little more to that, yeah.
This is prime Wolf's team spot, prime Parish spot.
Yeah.
You have Amelia down to her last two. You're relatively healthy. Assuming you can get a Parasong off, the game is pretty much over. And I think
it's over anyway because there's 2.5 minutes left.
That too, yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of those win conditions that was a lot of people are not thinking about at this tournament, which I guess is another one of those things that is kind of like Wolfe at the peak of his powers, right? It's just like all these like sort of niche win conditions that players just aren't prepared for at this stage of the game, like this stage of VGC history and also this stage of the 2015 format. Yeah,
and at this point you're probably going to see Wolfe take the max 45 seconds to make any decision. And in a spot like this, it's kind of broken too, because you get your 45 seconds to select the Gengar to come in, 45 seconds to click protect twice, and then it's over.
Right.
Which is pretty tough if you're Amelia, but
I
think to that end though,
2 minutes.
Yeah, I should have been tracking Wolf's like input time through this whole game, and that's something I'll look for in the next game. But I imagine that he plays most, if not all, of his games with this team taking max time every turn anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe not max time every turn, but like taking more time, just because one, it's important to kind of plan out your lines with this team. What can I take a knockout on? What can I perish? What's my end game? And that takes a little bit more time to think through on a team like this. But anyway, regardless, just making sure that you have this timer as a win con early on. And if you're taking more time early on, that kind of speeds up that timer win con too.
Yeah. And he is just going to take it on time here.
Yeah.
So timer became kind of like a real hot button issue in and around VGC at this time, before they kind of switched to like the round timer and and introduced your time and like all these different things that kind of made it a little bit more tolerable. But at this time it is like definitely abusable. People are generally not that happy about it. And you can kind of see why.
Yeah.
I was never one of those people that was really whiny about it, but like I definitely am understanding of where people are coming from.
And also, for those that don't know, timer works like you just saw. When the battle time runs out, the turn that's about to happen doesn't happen. It just ends right then and there. So like Wolfe still had turn time and he input his moves, but since the battle time ran out, that it's not like the game just ends before that turn plays out. If the turn plays out there, I think Amelia actually wins that. Just because the Amoonguss was pretty low, so was Arcanine. I don't know. Neither here nor there, it didn't happen. But for those that started playing post Gen 6, that is how timer mechanics worked, which is a big boon for the timer players.
Definitely. But a lot of people weren't playing to timer at this point, I guess, is another point, right? It didn't really... Like, this might have even been right around when people were like, oh yeah, maybe I should do that. beforehand, like you could win and lose on timer, but it was more of just kind of like an unintentional effect of like picking your moves slowly, and not really like a strategy that people were actually aiming at.
This is kind of the only team that ever actually aimed for that, though. I can't think of any others, at least that were popular. Well, okay, there was like do you remember the Dugong Parish team?
I do.
Yeah, that was all. I mean, same
Dr.
principle.
J.
Yeah. There's another really popular Parish team throughout 2015 that had a Dugong on it. I think instead of the Arcanine, otherwise pretty similar squads. But yeah, I think teams like this are the only ones that really actively play towards timer. But at a certain point during games, I think people started picking up on, oh, we're getting low on time. Maybe I played a timer now or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are certain matchups people are thinking about it too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're right. But now I guess is the point where it started to catch on as like something to be thinking about more than it was just like, okay, there's a timer, but it doesn't matter like 90% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely does going forward. So anyway, we're into game 2 here.
Yeah.
And obviously Wolf's playing Parish Trap, so we know kind of what win conditions he's generally playing to. But I think we kind of saw towards the end of game 1 that Amelia was like, oh, okay, like Gardevoir's kind of cool. And it was threatening like a pretty good amount of damage with Psychic onto pretty much everything that's on Wolf's team. And we saw, I think you said, Jake, that the combination of like a foul play plus a Psychic might have knocked out Arcanine and actually had Amelia winning the game at the end there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you said this is the game where she kind of decides that the Mega Gardevoir is going to be like the game plan she wants to play around.
This is one of the most legendary turns in like VGC lore. It's so good.
Yeah, so yeah, I almost don't even want to name
I know. I just want to like let it happen and then talk about it after. Oh, it's turn 2. I thought it was turn 1.
No, I think
whatever.
It's honestly a little bit.
This was 7 years ago. Give us a break.
Give us a break. Yeah. So anyway, this is going to be kind of like just a 1.125% or 12.5% damage trade onto like both players here. And then I think
the burn is notable on Sableye though, especially because it like reduces one of the few forms of damage Amelia has. Like it burns reduce foul play damage for the person using foul play, not for the target.
Yeah.
But here it is. Now is where the fun happens.
Yes, Quash. Speaking of things that were like not all that popular or expected at this point in VGC, like this might be like one of the first popular uses of Quash at all. And then to go on to dodge the overeat here, like the game is pretty much over at this point.
I'm gonna pause it here just because that turn was like truly one of the, because like you said, there are very few streamed tournaments in this time other than like Nationals and Worlds. And so for this turn to happen on a stream that a lot of people were watching, like pretty much anyone that wasn't playing or at a different regional that weekend is probably watching this. That was like one of the most talked about things that year. Just because that turn was so legendary. The way that Amelia like set that turn up, baiting out the Protect from Gengar turn 1, and then saving Quash for this time. Because I think most Sableye would be running Taunt in that slot. They would have had like Foul Play, Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Recover. That was like the standard set. And so just Quashing there to eliminate Gengar gives Wolfe a really, really hard time because that opens up so many more options for Amelia. Presumably Wolfe does not have Gothitelle, just like he did in game 1.
Right, you would expect it here.
Parish Trap is just no longer an option. That sets up Amelia very, very well.
Right, so immediately Wolfe has to like figure out how he's going to generate offense, which is like not a game plan that this team is prepared for, and he immediately switches Rain on top of his Arcanine, so you can kind of get an idea of like how this game is going for him. But yeah, I think that one of the things that we might have talked about, we definitely have, I don't remember exactly when, but we definitely have talked about it, is that it's like really important to like know who has an information advantage when you're playing somebody at this late in a tournament. And I think we might have even talked about it just kind of in reference to Wolfe the last time we talked about him, but like players like Wolfe tend to have an information advantage at this point. That's right, it was Dragon Claw. That's right. It was
yeah.
So players like Wolfe tend to have an information advantage at this point in the tournament. Like we're in Top Cut, everybody's just played 8 rounds of best of 1. Like somebody's got to know who this person in top 8 like has played and can like learn about their team, but instead it gets kept under wraps, and Sableye just kind of like whips out a Quash to take a knockout on Wolfe's Mega Pokemon and only Trapper. So like the game is kind of over at this point, but Wolfe is going to try and play for his 1 knockout and see if he can get to timer, but it's bleak.
This poor Arcanine. He's missed both of his two Will-O-Wisps.
Yeah. And
2 moves. Yeah. 1 Wisp and 1 Repeat. Zapdos is cool here. It's about to get revealed, but this Zapdos is actually Life Orb, which gives Amelia, again, so much more power that you really, really need against a team like this. Obviously, Politoed would get knocked out, might even from full, and it does a bigger chunk to Arcanine than a non-Life Orb Thunderbolt would, which is really convenient.
What were they running Life Orb for? Was that for like Assault Vest?
Probably for bulky Landorus, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I mean the players are just kind of like switching around, but now that kind of like both players' hands are revealed at this point, you're kind of thinking about what's going to happen in game 3. Like assuming that Quash is not really an option to gain an advantage unless Amelia positions like kind of ridiculously. Like it's a hard thing to do, right, against Wolfe's team, is to get actually into position to Quash like when he knows that it's coming. And then we kind of saw that the game plan for this team at all times, which was like it was pretty much a clinic game 1, right, where Gengar stays on the field. You can eject button it out like 1 time, and then you get the opportunity to use Politoed and Arcanine as like the partner next to it to like set up whatever field condition you feel like is best for you.
Yeah. This is like still a really, it's tough to see where the damage comes from Wolfe here, because like we know that Arcanine has Overheat, which will do a decent chunk to anything, but the rain is still up. Politoed's gonna have to come back in eventually. The rain's probably gonna go up again at some point with a team that switches as much as this one does. And then you have Giga Drain on a Moongus, which will do pitiful damage to anything. And then Scald Politoed, it's good for the Heatran. It'll do a decent chunk to Zapdos. But Gardevoir and Sableye can both stomach a couple of them, so the damage is a little bit lacking on Wolfe's side here.
Definitely, and I think the important thing about Politoed here is that you're just like eternally pinned by Zapdos.
Yeah.
So as much as you want to start scalding things, you don't ever really get the opportunity to.
Yeah. I think Life Orb, as nice as it is for the damage, actually kind of comes around to bite Amelia here, because Safety Goggles was one of the most popular items.
Right, yeah.
That and Citrus Berry, I think, were the 2 big ones. And so if this was Safety Goggles, I don't think the game has... Like, I don't think there's any hope for Wolfe here if that's Goggles, just because of Zapdos, like you said, is always going to be pinning that Politoed. It's not going to get knocked out by Arcanine. You can roost off any damage. And then Heatran just kind of runs away with the rest of it.
Right, yeah, but instead we're stuck on Life Orb here. And this is kind of where, like, okay, if you get your sleep turns, you might get the opportunity to like Overheat plus Scald Zapdos, and that might be enough to knock out here, but you're also still facing down Heatran, and I don't know, I guess this is like Wolfe's best offensive position that like he's been able to generate or will generate the entire series, honestly, where he's been able to slow everything down just enough that he can like potentially launch 2 attacks here. But Amelia does still have 2 Pokemon in the back, so like that's still it's still a big uphill battle, but for him to get it to a point where it's actually this close is obviously, he's a good player.
Yeah, you can see the wheels start to turning here. Like, the Zapdos is asleep. It's gonna probably get knocked out by like a Scald plus Overheat or something. The Heatran's at -3 or 4, 18 now. It's gonna be doing nothing. Sableye's very low. I didn't realize it was that low when it switched out. And we'll see here, it's just gonna get knocked out. So we're now to an even number of Pokemon. And I think this is when you kind of start to sweat a little bit if you're Amelia. Just because your Heatran is at a useless state, essentially. Your Zapdos is in a useless state, essentially, because it's asleep for another turn or 2. And you have an Amoonguss with Regenerator. You have a Politoed with leftovers. You've got an Arcanine that's just going to keep snarling. Like, this is where I think Wolfe has an opportunity to kind of gain a Pokemon advantage and then play for time again. There's only 4 minutes left. It's like, if you can knock out either Heatran or Gardevoir, or even the Zapdos in the back, you have a lot better chance of winning just on time than I think you did a few turns ago.
Right. Did we see speeds between Gardevoir and Arcanine here?
Gardevoir was faster
there it is,
before it Mega Evolved, so it's definitely faster now.
There it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And then power?
Zero.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's at minus 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is there to say? Yeah. So this kind of switched pretty quickly, and we're starting to see, I guess, the power of Polytoad. And now, this game is basically in the hands of like sleep turns.
Right.
So like depending on when Zapdos wakes up, and whether or not it's in, I think it is in hidden power range of Amoonguss, right? But we're also now suddenly
No,
at a
Amoonguss with their generator, it's definitely out of range, I think.
Wasn't it in red before it switched out? I think it might be in range.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not used to Life Orb Zapdos damage.
Yeah, I know. But the timer win condition has now flipped. Is kind of like the key piece about what's going on here.
I don't think Zapdos has even taken a turn of sleep yet, right? So like,
it might have taken one.
Maybe. But even so, like the Heatran's still at a. Oh yeah, it took one.
Oh, it had taken one. Yeah.
So Heatran's essentially worthless still. Like that did 0.
Yeah, that did 0 damage.
I don't think it even knocks out Polytoad from here. So you kind of have
two turns of leftovers. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know. It's still, I think, close enough. We have enough time for this next turn and then one more. I think we have to have one more after this, just looking at the timer. But if Wolfe is able to, it's really like, does Amoonguss survive Heat Wave and Hidden Power? Probably not. But can Polytoad knock something out with Scald? I probably can. And so that didn't even knock. Yeah, see, it wasn't range.
Yeah, you're right. It was close though. It was close.
Yeah, it was.
Does this even KO? Okay.
Imagine it doing like 5 damage.
Yeah, so Polytoad needs to take one knockout here, and it does, because Heatran was chipped a little bit. So yeah, pretty insane way that the game played out, where it kind of felt like it was almost over after turn 1.
Yeah.
And then these attack, like none of the Pokemon on this team, on Wolf's team, right, have more than one attack.
No.
They all have like status moves.
Unless you count Snarl and Overheat.
No, it doesn't count.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out how to generate offense from these Pokemon that simply like are not on this team to be providing offense at any point. So it's really impressive for him to climb out. And it was also really exciting, even though Amelia ended up getting 2-0'd here. Like it kind of felt, and this is kind of what I was talking about beforehand, is that like the fact that it was close when Wolfe was like at the peak of his powers. I keep saying that. Like it was really impressive and really exciting to watch. And like we all know that Wolfe's a great player, but like 95% of the people in the room like are rooting for the underdog here. So it's like a big time exciting moment.
And this is, I mean, obviously this is in top 4 of regional too. So this is by no means like a poor result for Amelia. I think a lot of people saw this match and were thinking, oh, she's probably going to be a pretty big threat in the coming weeks and months. And this was one of the months that was really fun to watch, just because you got to see some really exciting plays, but also you got to see just how good Wolfe is at this game.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's disgusting. Like I think after the Gengar goes down in game 2, I think a lot of people would have just forfeited and gone to game 3.
Right.
Even in tournament, like on Showdown, that's when you just forfeit on ladder and go next. But like at that point, I think a lot of people just immediately think, okay, this game's lost. I'm going to take the rest of this game to maybe get more information, try to plan out my game 3 strat, and just not even try to play to win that second game. But the fact that Wolfe knew that there are still ways that he could get back into this if he was able to mitigate as much damage as possible, Scald at the right times. I think Scald was like the MVP of that game, I think, just because it was the one thing doing significant damage. Yeah. So just incredibly well played from Wolfe there. It's really like a masterclass in VGC, a masterclass in Perish Trap, in Timer Stall. Like this is something that if you want to play this type of team ever, you probably can't anymore just because we're in a 7-year different format. But if you were in 2015 and you wanted to learn how to play Perish or like a time stall kind of team, I think you would point people to this game, this second game. Even game 1 was a good from the Perish standpoint, but this whole match, just perfection.
Definitely, yeah. And I think it's really kind of telling that this is like basically remembered as the Amelia set, right? And Wolfe won 2-0.
Right.
And then I think we mentioned it at some point, but he would go on to like kind of crush Ashton in the finals, and end up winning this regional here. But yeah, this is like kind of one of those examples that illustrates just like how and why he is maybe the I guess we could argue this, one of the best players of all time.
Yeah, definitely in the conversation.
Yeah, top 3.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's our 2015 match. I think we're done with vacations now, right? So we're back to just kind of like our 2-week thing.
Aren't you about to go out of town?
Yeah, but I'll be around. It's only for a long weekend.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got nothing till November, so.
Oh, nice.
I'll be
that's I have that thing too, so that's fine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we'll be back in 2 weeks. It won't be 2015, but we'll probably figure something out the day of and bring you another match. Thanks as always for supporting us. We appreciate it. We have a lot of fun doing this, so for the handful of views that we generate, we appreciate you guys. As always, if you have any recommendations or comments, concerns, criticisms of Jake, you can leave those for us in the comments or on Twitter or or wherever you know where to contact us. Of course, we gave you our screen names earlier in the video, so we look forward to any of that feedback.
Yeah.
All right, well, then until next time, thanks for listening to Future Sight, and we will catch you in 2 weeks.